Hello and welcome to this week's second to last episode of 2023. Future of XYZ today is super happy to have the amazing Chris Deaver with us speaking about an important topic for end of year and future year reflections, the future of bravery. Chris, welcome to Future of XYZ.
Thank you, Lisa. It's great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you here. I mean, you have a lot of experience. I mean, you have 2 degrees, including one in animation from Brigham Young in your home state of Utah, even though you're now in California. You obviously were a senior HR executive, both at Apple and at Disney during the Pixar years. You've consulted with many of the Fortune 500 companies. You've co-founded a leadership consultancy largely for creatives and executives. You co-host a podcast. And you both most recently, literally like 2 days ago, released a new book that you co-authored with your founder at BraveCore, your consultancy, called Brave Together. So that's why we're talking about the future of bravery. First of all, congratulations. McGraw-Hill is no joke as a publisher. But as you think about bravery as a topic in light of this book that you've just published, what does it mean to you? How do you define it?
Thank you. Yeah. First of all, it's great to be here with you, and I appreciate the glowing intro. I'll try to live up to it. And I will say I will claim both California and Utah. I spent a lot of my early years in California, but I definitely have spent a fair amount of time in Utah as well, and I appreciate the take on just overall what I've tried to do in my career, and just I think getting at the heart of bravery. I believe this, I say it's synonymous. It's not synonymous with the future, but it definitely is something that is, it belongs in the heart of the future. And what is it exactly? It's reaching inside of ourselves. First of all, breaking free from fear. Most of us have this conscious or subconscious sense of fear about, whatever given time in our lives, right? We may have a major thing happening. We may be struggling with some financial thing, or just wondering about or worrying about, some known or unknown thing. And bravery is just taking a step out of that. It's taking the step out of, mulling over or worrying or trying to, kind of stay in that place of, fear. I think it's just first breaking out of that.
It's in a world that's as chaotic as one could imagine it being, and much less now adding the holidays onto it. Stepping out of fear is a big deal, but it has longer term repercussions also. The subtitle of this book that you just wrote, Brave Together, is Lead by Design, Spark Creativity, and Shape the Future with the Power of Co-Creation. It's a bit of a mouthful. But what do all of these kind of topics have to do with bravery and breaking through that fear?
Yeah. So, when we look at breaking out of fear, the process usually it leads us to braving, right, or being brave. And I think we're blessed at a time to see opportunity in a lot of places. At least many of us. There are still parts of the world that people, struggle more than others with some of the basics, but by and large, we have the opportunity to pursue dreams and try to accomplish things that we haven't done before, big ideas, and that's being brave, right? And I think especially in the Western world, we've been encouraged to pursue those things, and sometimes with just pure hustle, work harder, work smarter, and those are, I think those are good things because they're moving us forward and getting us out of the fear and being brave. But the limitations of that are if we're braving it alone. What we know about any great band, right? U2, they transcended time. Over the course of the years, they would just keep reinventing themselves. Right? Bono says in his book or he talks about birth, death, and rebirth of the band. He saw it that way.
Yeah.
And Of course, there was a few moments along the way. There was, some side steps to discotheque. I think they made a formal apology for that album, but by and large, you have where people have done amazing things. Steve Jobs would say it's always a team, right? And great sports teams, right? The Warriors, when they're having their better years, have been a team, right? And it usually also shows up to some degree very selfless, right? Or very connected, and about others as well. And that, we believe, is the future, right? Which is being brave together. And so the elements of that are, doing it by design as leaders. Creativity has a big part of that. We ask ourselves, or so Ken Robinson, right, one of the most viewed TED Talks of all time, do schools kill creativity? Well, we would ask a similar question, which is really, why do businesses kill creativity? We don't have to ask if they do or don't. We know they have, for a while.
Right.
And yet that's so innate in us, right? We have an identity to be creative. And so that's a big, and then the last is just co-creation. That's a force, a multiplier for the future. Yeah.
I love that as a multiplier. And I want to come back to the topic of co-creation a bit, but you just said something about business killing creativity, our kind of innate sense. And of course, we all know that there's this reshaping or reforming of what work is in light of the pandemic and post-pandemic and work from home, especially for white collar jobs, right? Kind of in the Valley where you are, in New York City where I am, et cetera. So I think that's always an important question as we look. But what we are really talking about, it seems to me, in that toxicity of what is corporate. You've been in two organizations that, in fact, did not only kill creativity, they have made multiples on investment based on elevating creativity. So I think that's a cultural conversation, and you describe yourself as a culture shaper in general, as well as a leadership coach and people leader, obviously. So what is this kind of like, what does culture look like today, and why does it actually matter?
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the context you just set, because one of the challenges when we look at psychology, things always start with a premise, right? Or philosophy, you could say too, really philosophy. And based on that first stepping stone, we start to build the rest of what comes next. And unfortunately, we have lived in a world over the course of decades, centuries. Now, granted, there's been progress, right? Industrial age, information age. We had the knowledge workers. We went from manual worker to knowledge worker, and yet, a focus on efficiency, focus on effectiveness, and yet the limitations of that are the premise was really about numbers, right? And targets, and those aren't bad things. It's just they're not the leading. They're not the upstream work that has to be done to create those, right? So like Einstein would say, you have to, there's higher order answers to solutions or to problems we're dealing with. And so I'm paraphrasing, of course. But the idea being, what is the premise of the future, right? Because we see those things not working, right? We see the squeeze for efficiency. And what happened was we had a pandemic that shook people's foundations, but in such a way where it centered them too, right, on what matters in life. Well,
yeah, there was maybe freedom in it, freedom from fear in some ways. At the same time, there was so much fear.
Right. And then speaking for myself, it's like, well, maybe it's not a 2-hour commute each way to work. When I map that out, it's about a month of driving, like 24 hours, right, per year.
Much less the environmental impact of that as well.
Right. It's horrendous. And then what it does to your, psyche, it's like, okay. And then you're spending time away from friends or family. So I think there's that shift towards hybrid, towards remote, and, or some combination depending on the organization. But the main point is creativity as a premise, respecting and honoring people's creative identities. This has not been a starting point that leaders have really looked at. But the ironic thing is the companies, the brands, the cultures that these same leaders across industries admire the most, the Apples, the Pixars, the Nikes, they've been doing this for a really long time, right? So now the world's kind of catching up with that, but we have to go to the premise, and the worst thing would be to say, oh, well, a culture is a great sticker, let's just put it on everything, right? It's like, no, it's not a sticker.
Right. It's something really deeply embedded. That is, to your point, it's philosophical.
Right. And design and creativity, these should be the heartbeat. I mean, what did Steve Jobs do when he got back to Apple? He put the design team, right? Johnny Ive and, the Jedi, Evans, all these people that, and they weren't very many. It was a small team, right? About 20, give or take. And they fit around a table. That was the philosophy. But you could feel their presence. They were reverenced. But more than anything, it was the spirit of design that was and it's to this day, right? It's reverenced at Apple. That's true at Disney with Imagineers. Nike has their designers, and so I think those are some things we say, well, wow, they're doing it, but they're also, even engineers are thinking from a more design centric approach in those places, and that helps a lot. It
sparks something. I've recently taken on this role as managing director of IF Design, which runs one of the world's most prestigious design awards. And we were doing listen and learns recently, and the former CEO of Reebok, in this room of very high-powered designers, said something that really struck me, which is, you guys are the ones that make it so that we have any business to do. Without design, there's nothing to sell. And I think, again, elevating design to the center of a culture, to the creativity at the center of a corporate culture is a unique philosophy in many, many organizations today. But I think you're right that everyone's having to kind of flex those muscles if they want to survive and thrive.
Definitely. I just saw there's a Facebook reel video, Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank, which, Shark Tank, take it as you will. I'm more of a believer in dolphins. They're more collaborative and cooperative. But it was interesting because he's in this state of shock, right? Where he says in the video, he's like, I would always say, here's how you hire engineers. And he said, now all of these designers and artists are charging these prices, and they get constant work. And now, granted, that's not always it, but the fact is it is a skill set that is in high demand, because the future is, we talk about being more creative in the context of a company. Well, yeah, but why is it more creative? Because we are at a place in a journey as a civilization in the world where, well, once you get the kind of the basics and the structure set, the platforms, well, of course, people are going to want them to be aesthetically pleasing and human, right? And connect with what Steve would say, makes our heart sing, and we want that, yeah.
In these corporate experiences, I mean, those are two major blue chip companies. They're large organizations that you've worked at, both Apple and Disney, Pixar. What did these in-house experiences teach you about bravery?
Well, I think one of the things that really stands out was that, and this is a bit surprising, because most often the leader would think, well, bravery is just jumping right in, right? Especially like they're kind of that, that frontline, militaristic. I'm going to run through the, and they'll have the answers, right? What surprised me was, so we had a conversation with Ed Catmull, who started Pixar, and he shared that when he first started, he's a smart guy, he's a PhD, right? So he has every reason in the world to have kind of the book full of answers at any time, right? He's the Yoda. You press the wisdom dispenser and it just starts dumping information. That's how I assumed this was, these things are going to go. And we met with him, and he shows up. We're at the Lazy Dog restaurant in Cupertino, and he comes in with his bow of the short film shirt, and he sits down, salt and pepper mustache, got the little glasses, and he just starts listening and asking questions. And this was like a 30-minute meeting in my mind. It was, we didn't want to take up, turns into 3 hours. And he is just listening and asking great questions. And at one point I said, what's your leadership philosophy? Because I was thinking, like, I don't know what's going on here, because I thought Yoda was going to do what Yoda does, right? No, and he said, I lead with a question. And we saw that as, that's a premise, for the future. That's a principle. And we call it a meta principle in the book, because it's a frame for building first principles for whatever culture you're building, even in your life. But as a leader, you lead with questions. Leading with answers, you don't empower people. they come back and you just that vending machine, right? Leading with questions creates brave space, right? Where people feel empowered. They become leaders themselves. And this is what's happened, right, with their culture. They have a culture of brain trust, and it's just, it works very well.
I think it's interesting. You have your podcast is actually called that, Lead with Question. It's premised in the curiosity that I have, which is how Future of XYZ came along, which is like, let's talk about a subject, and dive deep with the subject matter experts. So I think there's a lot to it. What are kind of, if we think about as we move in the last kind of few minutes, 5 minutes or so to the future, what are the most important lessons that you took away from this as concerns, where the world needs to go?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the context of, again, being brave, it's created, we talk about safe spaces and those are good. Brave spaces, I think, are those where, first of all, I'd say safe space would be, hey, it's pathos. It's, we get to show up with our hearts as well as our minds. Brave space is we're doing those things, heart, mind, but also principles. So we're aligning on these things that are timeless. And, there's something about, we get in the state of flow, right? Any of us do art or design, or even, writing or a sport or skiing, which I don't do very well. So I don't get in a state of flow there. I'm just crashing down the mountain. But for those that do, when you get in a state of flow, you feel something and you're outside. What happens is you step outside of time. And that's a powerful thing. And in work, we have not tapped it. This is untapped territory. When we see the great teams playing, they look like they're almost one being, like a flock of birds, right? The Navy SEALs, they talk about this flow. It's a shared flow, really. And they don't know how to hire for it. They don't know how to explain it. It's just like, okay, everybody is just moving like one. And so in our work, this is something I think we've discovered, with BraveCore and in this book, Brave Together, is there is so much potential to shape the future in a co-creative way when we are in this state of shared flow. And why not in meetings, right? Why not show up and have kind of your building blocks in mind, and then with the magic, revelation happens, right? Something that wasn't there before. So it's not just an agenda exchange or just sharing tasks. It's creating something inspirational that can emerge, and that's what happens in the best cultures. So I'm really encouraged by that. I think in so many contexts, that could really make a difference in the world.
You just were talking about the fact that, like, even someone like the Navy SEAL doesn't totally know how to hire to get this group flow, if you will. I think one of the things that's really interesting is, like, bravery is a character trait, right? I mean, like courage. In this crazy, chaotic, often seemingly collapsing world, it's probably more important than ever that more people have this character trait. Is there a way that you can teach or train or hone bravery? Like, is it possible? And if so,
yes. How? Yes. I love that question. So the paradox is, and I think we go down back to the path of traditional methods, optimization of brave or braving it alone would say, well, you just keep grinding and hustling and doing those things. But, watch after you turn the dial and get it to a certain hour, you can only get it so perfect, right? Until it's all right on the second. So that kind of maxes out. But the point of, like, what is beyond for us in this space of being brave, I think the answer really is going deeper to expand out further, right? We talk about meditation, transcendental prayer, whatever you want to do. And grounding, right, in nature, sound bath. I had an experience with one of those, and it blew my mind, right? I felt like I got decluttered psychologically. There's these things that will bring us into our core, but also specifically about, whatever challenges or pain that's just been harboring there. And we've had a lot of pain collectively. We're talking, global culture or United States or other places. There's been a lot of pain, and individually there's been pain for people. And so, one of the ways to really expand our bravery is to turn that pain, and the world would say, well, no pain, no gain. But to me, that equation says, well, I got to go chasing pain. Really? I got enough pain for today and for now. But how do I convert that pain into power, right? That can fuel my future. And how do I do that collectively with others? And, things like forgiveness, right? These are powerful, right? You can, you want to be more powerful than you can ever imagine. Well, forgive somebody. Find that path to a higher kind of transcendent being. Viktor Frankl, who was in the Nazi death camps, he talks about, and he took it a step further, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At one point, he said it needed a revision. He said, I missed this part that there's actually beyond self-actualization. And this is something that, we look across the zeitgeist and what people are doing out there. And I said, well, many people are in pursuit of self-actualization. But he would say, he said later, it deserved a revision. It should be self-transcendence. And Viktor Frankl echoed that. He said, that's where, the future really is. And I think, yes, so as we go deeper, we can start changing the world from within. And as we do, we'll have that, kind of influencer power to be more brave in the contexts that really matter to us and others.
There's so much there. And I mean, I have two last questions, Chris, for you. I could unpack that last answer quite a ways, but we're in this kind of cusp, and some could argue we are past the cusp of AI, generative technologies starting to be our co-creators. And I think for now, at least, we still have that human plus AI being kind of the winning formula. Hopefully it stays that way. In the next 5 to 10 years, given that, what do you see as kind of the future of bravery and courage in light of what you're talking about in partnership with technology?
Yeah, whenever we talk about the future, I always think about the movie Interstellar. Chris Nolan. I watch this movie regularly. I'll admit it. It may be an addiction, but the main point is and to go back to set some context for this, Matthew McConaughey, during an Academy Awards ceremony, about the time this movie came out, he said a young man had asked him, who are your mentors? And he assumed he's going to say, some big Hollywood name. And Matthew said, it's me in 10 years. And at the time, I didn't really understand what he was talking about until I saw this movie, right? And when we see it, it's like, oh, he's in the future and he's pulling his past self into the future, right? In the best way possible. And of course, he's having a debate with himself too. But the point is, and there's also an emotional element, right? Which is, Dr. Brand would say, love transcends, right? Time, gravity as well. But the idea is, I think, okay, how do we both individually, what's our best future, us, and then as a collective or cultures, if a culture was a self. So I think about these, like Apple's, kind of in its 40s or whatever. It's like, okay, it's got like, kind of life. It's kind of in a rhythm. It's got some kids, or it's got things more figured out. Disney was an older, it's got more grandfatherly, type, grandmotherly type company. But Pixar helped disrupt some of that and made it kind of modern. But you have cultures that could really benefit from a view of that future self. Say, what is that future self? And if we ask ourselves too, in the world itself more broadly, right? Like, what do we really want to see? I think Martin Luther King Jr. gave one of the best descriptions of that future. And what most people don't know about that story, right? That experience on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial was that this was a co-created moment. He came to the pulpit. He actually had some notes prepared, but as he's sitting before that, he spontaneously wrote some other notes that he actually ended up using. And as he started to get into this rhythm, there was a point in time, it's barely noticeable in the video, but you can hear a voice, a woman by the name of Mahalia Jackson, who's a gospel singer. And she was well known at the time on the Billboard charts for different songs. And she says at one point, and he's starting to kind of get settled, right, into a rhythm. And she says, Martin, tell him about the dream. Tell him about the dream. And that's when he goes into,
I have it.
I have a dream. And the dream the picture that he paints is both the real of the struggle that he and all of these people and collectively us were facing, but then the ideal future that's in some ways fulfilled, but it's still unfulfilled, right? But it's a bright, beautiful future filled with hope. And what does it require? The bridge from here to there? Well, it's to be brave. And the only way to do it is together.
Wow. I'm going to close, Chris, because I think that's a pretty hopeful ending. But the former CEO of Best Buy, who now teaches at Harvard, wrote about this book. The leadership we need in the future is not about command and control or maximizing shareholder value. It's about inspiring hearts, unleashing human magic, and building purposeful organizations together. If, like I do, you believe this, you must read Brave Together, as you will find that is such a helpful guide on this journey. Thank you for sharing with us on Future of XYZ today what your thoughts are on bravery and why it's so important for our collective future.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's been great to be here.
Well, everyone, the book came out on Tuesday, December 5th, 2023. You can find it wherever you order your favorite books. It's called Brave Together by Chris Deaver and Ian Clausen, his co-founder and co-author. For everyone watching, if you don't already know, you can listen to us anywhere you get your favorite podcast. And you can also watch this video on YouTube at our presenting partner, Rhode Island PBS, ripbs.org/XYZ. We look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time for our last episode of 2023, the 115th overall of Future of XYZ. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and leave us a 5-star review. Thank you again, Chris. Happy holidays and stay brave.
Thank you. Thank you. You too.